Welcome to the 2021 Power List, where we decided to focus on leadership and inclusion. The executives on this year's Power List have selected power players within their own organizations who represent impactful, innovative, inclusive leadership. We will release exclusive interviews with our power players talking about these topics weekly. In this video, you'll hear from Chip Wade of Union Square Hospitality Group.
How do you kind of incorporate events that are happening with racial justice into your daily life and talk to employees who may be struggling with things that are happening in the news?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say a couple of things. First and foremost, the death of George Floyd had a significant impact on me as an individual, as a Black male. I have two sons who soon to be 24 and the youngest is 21. And so for me, it was very emotional. I am comfortable enough in my style, my leadership on two different occasions. One was a broader 180 plus employees and leaders on a chat with Chip where I broke down and just began to cry. And the comment about it being a burden for me is one that I welcome. It is unfortunate that there are too few African-American leaders in our industry. And so for me, it's a very personal issue at hand. So I will continue to share. So when the unfortunate death of George Floyd, it took the entire organization and shook us to our core. Our African-American hourly employees, including those who were displaced and laid off, our African-American sous chefs and chefs were troubled. And quite frankly, they were initially troubled with our lack of engagement as a leadership team. It was a wake-up call. We did not respond as quickly as we should have. And so one of the things that Danny and I, along with Patty and other members of the senior team, is we decided not to go on this journey by ourselves. And so we hired Dr. James Pogue, who has been a great resource for Union Square Hospitality Group. And he has led the senior leadership team on a number of informative and educational sessions to really help us reshape our diversity and inclusion platform. And, you know, what James and Danny and I talked about is just because I, Chip Wade, am a Black leader in the organization, that doesn't automatically mean that I know all the answers, right? And it's not fair for the organization to look to me to have all the answers. I have some. I have a strong and definitive point of view, but we really thought it was in our best interest to seek counsel from others. And Dr. James Pogue has been fantastic. We have also done an analysis internally to say, let's take a look at our own current platforms, our own diversity and inclusion council. Is it effective? Is it working? Have we actually listened to our employees? And in some cases, I would grade us an A+. In other cases, quite candidly, I would grade us as a C- or a D. But that level of awareness and opening and transparency to say, you know what, we're not as good as we should be, and listening to the employees has helped us tremendously. Hard stop. There's one more thing I want to share, and that is my personal mission is to help to mentor and develop women and people of color. I've shared this story before. In 2001, I was fortunate to get promoted to an officer of a company, and that was with Darden Restaurants. And in that time frame, 2003, 4, and then 5, there were, I believe, 3 African-American CEOs in the restaurant hospitality space. And so you fast forward 19 years, and sadly, there is zero representation. And so for me, at this point in my career, what I can do is work with others, Gerry Fernandez at MFHA, to work on mentoring and development programs so that we can do something about the next generation of Asian women leaders, that we can do something about the next generation of Black and Brown leaders. And they're numerous at the multi-unit level, both in operations, in HR, and finance. They're just waiting for someone to give them a shot.
So is that what you'd kind of say to other organizations, is partner with somebody who knows more and then start to mentor those in your company that you want to succeed, so you can have a more diverse workforce that comes from more varied backgrounds and produces a more diverse company?
Well, I would say a couple of things. Both of those things I think are appropriate, right? If you don't have the answers, then I would counsel any of my peers, whether they be in hotel, fast casual, full service, to seek counsel from others, seek counsel from experts. You can't go wrong there. I'd say number two is listen to your employees. And as you noted before, right, the vast majority of our workforce, particularly in our culinary centers, in our kitchens, are Hispanic, are Black. And so we have an obligation and a responsibility to really, truly listen to our employees. Thirdly, if I can be candid, I'd say do something, right? This notion of no action, I think, is just not appropriate. And so at some point, every leader is going to have a defining moment as they have a competent, confident white male resume, and they have an equally competent and confident Hispanic female, right? And so if you want your leadership team, if you want your organization to look like America, then there's a defining moment. And then that CEO, that president, the head of HR are going to have to start to make more challenging decisions. Holly, if I can share with you, we decided for a variety of reasons that we wanted to fill two positions on my senior leadership team. And we did that in the middle of the pandemic, and we began these discussions in mid-July. And I was very emphatic that said, I'd like to ensure that we have more women reporting into me. So this was a chief technology officer, open position, and the chief financial officer. And so, in one case, we hired an executive search firm. We came down to that fork in the road, as I just mentioned, a very competent and confident male, and then very competent and confident females. And in both cases, I'm very proud to say, chief technology officer, female, chief financial officer, Asian female. And I can say confidently, I gave up zero in terms of quality of candidates, both in terms of their technical skill set, the culture that they bring in, the value sets. And so thirdly, and I apologize for this elongated response, but it really, at the end of the day, leaders have to make a tough decision. I'm going to screw some things right. We don't always get it right, but I think at the end of the day, you have to walk your talk. And that's simply what I try to do. I think there's a period in my career when I left Darden, I saw it a great opportunity. I had the opportunity to re-interview with Darden and other large national chains. And I would tell you the salient reason why I interviewed and rejoined Darden, because there was a leader who looked like me in the CEO and chairman role. And for anyone that doesn't think that matters, I think they're a bit naive and maybe fooling themselves.
And so what advice do you have for future leaders, people who aren't quite up in the ranks yet, who are moving their way up, who want to be where you are? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Listen, I'd say a couple of things. First and foremost, be very, very curious. I often speak about this notion of maintaining an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. It's a whimsical statement. I'm mindful of that. I've been saying it for 25 years. But I think for women, for people of color, to maintain an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, it simply means you are always thirsty. And so I would say first and foremost, stay curious and stay inquisitive. I would say number two, seek different opportunities. As a young man in my 30s, I assumed that I would ascend to the vice presidential and officer level via operations, but that wasn't the case. I was very fortunate to spend 6 years of my professional career in HR, and then 6.5, 7 years in real estate and development. And so, be open to new assignments and new roles that will give you that breadth of knowledge and experience and exposure. Number two. I would say number three, these are all interrelated, but don't sit on the sidelines, right? Don't wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder. Um, that it takes some degree of both courage and confidence to raise your hand and say, if you forgot about me, I'm here. And I would say that that is just a dynamic, quite frankly, that women face, that people of color face. It's a personal kind of characteristic trait, maybe. That's probably not the right term. But there's this like DNA where the assumption of, well, I'll just sit here, I'll do my job, and I'm sure someone's going to see me. And I would just say to every young female leader, Asian American leader, Hispanic leader, don't make that assumption. Raise your hand and ensure that your bosses know that you have a dream and an aspiration.
Stay tuned for our next leadership conversation from the Power List.